Hello, it's David with Ural Motorcycles, back with you again this week to show you how to use your spare tire to replace a flat on the back of your Ural motorcycle. Okay, so you finally got a flat tire. It's all right, you're on a Ural, you got a spare. But before you take off your helmet, before you take off your gloves, before you get on your cell phone and let whoever know that you're safe and you're going to be late, you might want to consider the safety of changing the tire where you're at. So look around. Do you have enough room on the side of the road where you're at? Is there a parking lot up ahead that might be a little bit safer? Are you on an incline where you can't safely change the tire without the bike potentially rolling back? The sidewall is probably already destroyed, so driving at a very slow speed in a controlled manner might not be a bad idea to get yourself off the side of the road and into a place where you can work. The first thing you're going to want to do is get the bike up on the center stand. I'm using the shovel to raise the bike up so we can utilize the center stand. We've actually made a video on this before. If you haven't seen it, go and watch that, which covers this step in more detail. After you got the bike up on the center stand, you're going to want to get your toolkit out. This particular bike is a 2017, so it's got the underseat storage. You typically find your toolkit under there. If you have an older bike, these seats and the seat base are actually retrofittable to older models. When you unroll your toolkit, you're going to find most of the tools that are required to do pretty much all the basic repairs that you're going to ever encounter. You're going to find a pair of gloves and quite a few specialty tools like your spare wheel nut spanner and things like the 22mm wrench that's required to get off the axle on a two-wheel drive. This particular bike is a two-wheel drive, so we're going to want to use the 22mm wrench to get the rear axle nut off the back. But as you can see, the drive shaft is kind of inhibiting us getting a clear shot in there to take that off. So you can take the sidecar wheel and rotate it to move that. Simply by lifting up on the fender, you can actually spin the wheel around, and in turn it turns the drive shaft so you can access this more easily. The toolkit has gone through some changes over the years. The newer version actually includes a little extension so you can get a little more leverage. The first toolkits didn't come with an extension like this, but there was usually something included in it that you could use to get a little more leverage if you needed. For example, the spark plug tool, you could have slipped it over the end and used that. So start by taking off the rear drive shaft nut. It takes a little time, but eventually you'll get to the point where you can just spin it off with your fingers. Now, in this video, we're showing you how to do this with the tools that are provided with the bike. So once you have the nut off, there's a washer back here that you're also going to want to grab. Right there. Now you're going to want to go into your toolkit and get your 17mm, 19mm combo wrench. Now this is going to be a little controversial. The toolkit only comes with one 17mm wrench, but it does come with a pair of pliers. So you're going to use the pliers, assuming this scenario is emergency roadside repair and you have not prepared or put any more tools in your bike. You're going to hold the head of the bolt with the pliers, and you're going to remove the lock nut or loosen the lock nut, which is the pinch bolt for the axle. Since we're dealing with lock nuts, let me just point out real quick, lock nuts are not intended to be used over and over again. but they can be reused a couple of times. A good rule of thumb to determine whether a lock nut is still usable is if you can spin it on to the threads with your fingers, and then you can't get it any tighter with your fingers, you can reuse it. If you can spin it all the way to where threads are sticking out past the nylon part, that lock nut is no good anymore. Now we're going to take our 19 millimeter combo wrench, and again, using the 17 millimeter side, you're going to break these two bolts that hold the brake arm to the caliper bracket. And if you're afraid of busting your knuckles, put on those gloves that come in the kit. So if you slip, you're not skinning your fingers. Once you get them loose enough, remove those two bolts completely. Making sure not to lose any of the lock washers or flat washers. Now you take the 12 and 13 millimeter combo wrench, and you're going to loosen this bolt that holds the reaction link to the swing arm. You're not going to take it, you don't need to take it all the way off. You're just going to loosen it so it can be moved around. So now you're going to want to take an Allen wrench or hex key, or what I like to do is take the cross piece for the spark plug tool, and you're going to want to put it in the axle hole. Now, I haven't previously disassembled this, so I wasn't cheating, but you're going to want to take the axle all the way out. Now you should be able to move the reaction link out of the way and just let it hang. Remember, that bolt is just loose in there, so it'll stay on the swing arm. Now with the tire press back, you should be able to pull the whole caliper and caliper bracket assembly away from the wheel and the rotor. Now you can pull the wheel towards you off the splines of the funnel drive, and then you're going to tilt the top out and the bottom in towards the sidecar, and you can actually angle it out past the mud flap. Now here's a real fun part. You got to remove the rotor, so you're going to use a 6 millimeter Allen key. Now remember, we're using all the stock tools that come with the bike. We're not using anything that you might have in your garage. So you're going to want to put the Allen key in there, and then depending on what you have in the toolkit, if you have an extension arm to help get more leverage, or you've probably seen this in the past where you loop a wrench around the end, you can use that to pry. So you're going to want to make sure that those are pressed in really firm. And again, wear gloves if you're worried about slipping and scratching your knuckles. So you're going to want to hold it in real tight. You strip this out, you're going to really hate yourself for it. Once you get these all broken loose, you should be able to do it by hand after that. Put this away and save these bolts, because you're going to be putting this on your spare. Now you can take your spare wheel nut spanner or wrench and remove the spare wheel nut. Now these are usually pretty darn tight. And you want to hold this in tight too, because there it goes. Because you don't want to slip off and damage the tool, or this is just aluminum. You don't want to strip this out either. Once this is off, lower the rack out of the way, and you can remove your spare wheel. Before we go any further, let me talk about the changes to the rear wheel over the years. So in 2014, when the first three-wheel disc brake bikes came out, the rear wheel used a variation on the original drum hub with bosses cast into the new hub casting to hold the disc brake. The thought there was that it was a larger hub with shorter spokes. It would be a stronger assembly for the lateral load that the bike is experiencing on the back when you're going through corners. There's a lot of strain on that rear wheel. So until we could finish the testing on the smaller hub that was used on the front and the sidecar for the rear wheel fitment, this wheel from 2014 through 2017 had a sticker on it that indicated this was for spare wheel use only. And it was intended for low speed and temporary use until you could get into a town or your dealership or wherever to have the original wheel and a hub replaced, or a tire replaced on the original wheel and hub. So as of 2018, the bike shared the same wheels for all three positions, with the small hub, the longer spokes, and this adapter hub that was on the rear was duplicated for the spare wheel on the sidecar. So as of 2018, and any bike newer, you're going to see that the rear wheel is now identical to the front and the sidecar. So to finish preparing the spare for installation on the rear of the bike, there's typically little rubber plugs that are protecting the threaded holes on this adapter. So you're going to want to remove the rubber plugs and install the rotor and the bolts that were removed from the other hub. Now, this is all emergency situation recommendations. When you get into the next town, or you go to your dealership, whenever this is replaced, you should always use Loctite. You should replace any lock nuts that are no longer useful. You should lube your your axle before it's reinstalled, and you should torque everything to factory specifications. Obviously, this is supposed to simulate being on the side of the road, so we're not going to be able to do that here. Then you take your 6mm Allen wrench and run these down. And with whatever tool at your disposal to give yourself a little more leverage, make sure, like I said before, you're pressing hard on this. You don't want to strip these out, and give it a good turn. You don't want them backing out, and we're pretending like you didn't have some Loctite in the sidecar just for such occasion. Okay, now it's ready to go on the bike. And from here, everything is the reverse order of what we did already. So you're going to tilt the bottom in towards the sidecar, the top out towards you, and sneak this in here past the mud flap. And then you're going to have to lift this up onto the splines. Yeah. And it'll hold itself in place just like that. Now you can take your caliper and bracket and slip that over your rotor like so. Put your reaction link, swing that back up into place, and I would even install those bolts, your 1719 combo wrench, and your 1213 combo 13mm side, and you tighten the bolt to the reaction link on the swing arm. Now you're ready to reinstall your axle. And when you go to repair your flat and you take all this apart again, you're going to want to make sure you re-grease all this stuff. If you start it in, you may have to lift it up and drive it home. Now on the other side, you're going to reinstall the washer first and then the lock nut. Now when you go to tighten up the nut on this side, you're going to want to hold the axle with a tool through the axle hole to prevent it from rotating. Once you've got that tightened up and it's sandwiching everything together, then you can tighten your pinch bolt on your swing arm. And that'll pinch the axle to prevent it from rotating. And now you should be good to get back on the road. Now you can take your rubber plugs that were on your spare and put those in the threaded holes on this hub to protect the threads. Put your flat rear tire in place of the spare. And then tighten the whole thing down. Pressing in so you don't walk out of the holes and wreck your tool or your spare wheel nut. Okay. And there you are. You just changed the rear tire with your spare tire on your Ural motorcycle. Put away your tools. Tie up your tool roll, stow everything, and get back on the road. Hopefully this has given you a little bit of insight of what you might want to bring with you in addition to what comes stock on a Ural motorcycle, like maybe some shop rags and some mechanics disposable gloves. And this is also why some longtime Ural riders bring a socket set and maybe a bottle jack and other things. So I hope this video helps and it was what you were looking for. This has been requested for quite a while. And as I've asked before, if you like these videos, please let us know in the comments. If you're watching on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. If you're watching on Facebook, give us a like. And we'll talk to you next time.